Okay, next is this piece by Peachy. I think they wanted some tips on shading and things like that. With shading, it's very subjective as a term. I think generally it's considered to be the lightening to darkening of a form. But I think some things to consider when making any image really is that everything's subjective to the foundations that you lay before that. So like composition here would lead into content, and obviously you have the idea first and that drives the composition, then that drives the content, and then that drives like the values, and then that drives the colour, and you know the lighting drives the values and drives the colour. So it's a very linear, despite this, what I've done here, it's a very linear little progression. And I think once you've maybe fallen short in one area, it can affect the other area. So shading will be something down here, but I think the foundations of why it might not have worked could have been something up with like the content or even the composition. So it's all subjective to the piece that came before it. And having said that, I think that I can help you with shading and lighting, like especially with these houses here. I think I'll take a section of a house here and just walk you through how I would shade and I would render it using colour and light, obviously. But I think more foundationally there might be issues in places that because I think the rendering here is fine. I think it's okay. There's things like this where like I'm not sure where this really high saturated purple is coming from when you know everything around it is this sort of muddy orange and light tan colour. So I'm not sure where that purple's coming from, so that kind of throws everything off balance. Like if we get rid of it super botchy and really quickly, we'll see that it's not a better image completely, but it's slightly improved because it removes that colour that was a little bit of a stain on the image. So already it kind of looks a little bit easier on the eyes. Again, everything's subjective, so it's not necessarily any better, but it's easier on the eyes, right? Okay, so I haven't said that about this. I think I can help you on shading with the lighting here, for example. Like, I think your values are too light all around this area for your light to really read as lighting, because a lot of the time people would say lighting. I remember some early lessons, I had some really bad lessons, would say just, you know, create a little fog of light around that area, and that's supposed to illustrate lighting. It can if the area is full of like water vapor and dust particles in the air. That's how you would illuminate the light. That's how you would illustrate that there is light somewhere, and that's how you can see it sometimes when you see the sun, you know, coming between your curtains or through a tree or any kind of dusty environment. You see that dust being illuminated, and that's how you can see those beams of light. Otherwise you can't see light, you just see the effects of it. So having said that, I wouldn't do it this way. I would illustrate light through showing it on our content, on the form, by illuminating the form. So what I mean by that is, don't show light necessarily by the colour, as you've done here, but maybe sorry, what am I doing? There we go. So I'm just going to take this little area here and duplicate it and send it out, just so I have a little intensified area to work on. Here we go. That's all good. Yeah, cool. So I'll start by saying that, like, you want to illustrate the light in here. The value of the light is quite muddy. It's only at a 50%, roughly 60% value, so we want to like bring that up a little bit. It's a tungsten light of an interior, so it's going to have that like dull orange, orangey yellow fade to it. There we go, something like that. And we can brighten that up later as long as we got a little bit more accurate in terms of our lighting. Now, you should probably start by doing the local color of every, or at least the major objects in the scene, or as many as you can really. So this bush here, for example, I'm going to say it's a little bit bright, especially if, you know, the local color can be influenced a little bit by the light. And if you know you're doing a scene in the dark, then the local color can start a little bit darker than it otherwise would have in the day, just to help you out a little bit. But I'm going to do that a little bit here, so I'm going to darken it slightly, I'm going to cool it off, and I'm just going to do your average kind of green bush color here just to illustrate. Here's a little green bush, and it's just a local color, completely flat. I'm going to do the grass underneath it as well. There we go. I'm going to do the grass. I'm going to do the grass slightly warmer. Sorry. Slightly warmer and very slightly lighter, just because it's a plane that's facing the sky, and in this case and a lot of cases obviously the main light source comes from the sky. Not in this case though. So you've got the ground, and you've got those there. Cool. So once you've got the local color for things, then you can start doing the effects of lighting on the objects, and that's a real reason for having lighting at all in real life or in illustrations. So I'm going to separate the layer. I'm going to create a clipping mask. I'm going to do the lighting coming from this window. So I'm going to grab the local color, and I'm going to warm it up to the yellow because it's a warm light. So I'm going to warm it up. I'm going to not decrease the saturation at all, because normally you would with the sun, because it's quite a white light even though it's warm. But in this case, the tungsten lights are very they're very warm, and they're very they've got a lot of colour in the light, so I'm not going to decrease the saturation, and I'm going to increase the brightness, obviously, which increases the which shows that, you know, there's light hitting the form. So there we go. You got the light coming out onto the bush there. Now we're going to do the shadows. Just going to do them directly on the piece. The shadow sides, obviously, if the light is hitting here, the light can't get to here, so here's where the shadows are. I'm going to cool them off a little bit by bringing it into the blue, and obviously darken it a little bit. And I'm just going to fade up very roughly from the bottom, because the closer you get to the top, the more of that light has kind of seeped through the leaves of the bush, so it'll be a little less shaded up there. Same thing here, just leave a little bit on the rim there, just because it's a soft edge, it's not a complete square. This bush isn't like a complete square. So there we go, something like that, a little bit amorphous to show that it's, again, a little bit organic of a shape. You can even have like little bits of the leaves where they're catching the light in from catching the light. So there we go, and then you do the same. That's a basic light and shadow with the local colour, and that should illustrate a little bit more. Now we can do the same thing here, and every time you do something like this, the more you add, the more you should be reinforcing, in this case reinforcing the light and the colour. So I'm going to warm it up, pick the local colour of the grass, warm it up a little bit, brighten it a bit. Again, not going to change the saturation, even though it's further away from the bush, it's pretty much the same distance when you think of how far the sun is from the earth, etc. There we go. I'm just going to soften the edges a little bit there, because it's not completely sharp. You'll get a little bit of the leaves casting a cast shadow on the bottom. I could even do it for this sort of stone bit here if you want to. So I'm going to change the local colour to some sort of really grey, gravelly sidewalk stone pavement. And then do the light on this as well. So I'm going to grab it here. Where's it to? There we go. Grab the local colour. I'm going to warm it up. It's going to go into a kind of a cyan baby blue. Here I'm going to increase the saturation a little bit because the pavement's so grey, and I'm going to increase this a little bit, and you should get something, maybe too much there, something that looks like this. I can increase the brightness maybe a little bit more. There we go. So you can see it's not going to, you might have like a little shadow here or something, and then in between the lines of the pavement there, a little bit on this side as well. There we go. Now all you have to do now really is just sort of like post-processing effects. I could do the house a little bit too if you want to. I could just go around here just to show you that, you know, the local color affects everything, and then that color affects the color and value of your object too. It's kind of the right color, but it's a little bit too bright, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit, imagining that, you know, it doesn't have another light source in this area. If you count the moon, that's fine, then you're just adding another light source, which is good, but it complicates things. But if you can do it, then great. I'll start with like one light source to begin with. I'm going to do a little bit of cool off underneath the gutter area here, so that's going to be there in and around sort of small cracks and small sort of like where two objects meet, you get a little bit of an occlusion shadow, which I'll do on the bush in a minute. Down here and on there, and yeah, I'll just do that there. I'll flatten them down now that I'm working a little bit more fast. There we go. You might even get on the rim here of like the windowsill outside area, you're going to get this warmed up a little bit, and it's going to have a lot more colour in it. There we go, something like that. You could even push this colour into the, you know, you can even go the other way to warm with this. It really depends on how kind of close you are really, but a purple would work here because it's mixing with the blue of the windowsill and you're getting some kind of purple colour. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think everything else now is just sort of small details. So occlusion shadows, you're going to get an occlusion shadow down there, which is where the light barely reaches. It's a little bit like doing line art on things. It's kind of half the reason for line art, I think, that we see these kind of tight occlusion shadows and it makes us think that they're lines. And then you get, you know, a little bit faded away here, get a little bit of a cast shadow here too, on the other side of there, around there, just like darker shadows in areas that really won't get the light. So like down here, for example, you're going to get a little bit more of a cool off. Right in this corner, there's going to be hardly any light getting into that corner. All the way at the bottom of here, and some of these bushes here, and even on the grass too. So like where the grass meets that, where the grass meets the bush as well. There we go, either side of the grass on here maybe, if it's a tiny little lip, if the grass is slightly longer. Then just everything else is just detailing. So you want your blades of grass flicking out like that, you're going to get one or two that's really capturing the light, so you can like highlight some of those in there. Same thing on here, you're going to get some that are really going to catch that light, so especially closer to the edge here. And then some that even kind of go super bright as they're really catching the light. And now we can sort of adjust this a little bit. I think this could be a little bit whiter. Get some detail in and around of what's happening in the inside scene. And now everything else is kind of post-processing really. I think you can do sort of bounce light as well if you wanted to, and I'm chucking a lot at you at the moment, but just try to get it out. So bounce light would be like the fact that the light is coming from here, hitting here, and then bouncing up against here. So you could have a bounce, a lot of the time you'll have a bounce light that's a lot cooler as it's cooling off, but because of the intensity of this of the tungsten light in the interior, I'm just going to do a slight warmer bounce light, and it wouldn't be anywhere near as bright as the one that's hitting on top, because again it's got to travel from here to here, then from here to here, so during that process it really fades in intensity, but it really adds another dimension to your form when you do stuff like that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's the basics of how I would illuminate and how I would render, or otherwise how I would shade. Do a few details off the edges here. That's cool. Alright, and now after everything is said and done, you can start adding post-processing effects like linear dodge and color dodge. I think I'd do a color dodge on this one just to really sell the color. There we go. I think I'll make it a little bit more orange and less bright, more colour. There we go. So it looks really warm now, and it's maybe hitting a little bit down here too. And maybe a bit on here. I'm just going to warm that up. There we go. So now it looks really warm and inviting, and now it looks like a light source only because you can see the effects hitting the other form. So yeah, all you've got to do is now do that to everything else in the scene. But I really hope that helps. That's how I kind of build up a piece from flats, working with colour, then with shadow, then little details here, a little bit of ambient occlusion around the place, a few highlights depending on the material, and then post-processing effects to really help sell the idea. But yeah, I hope that helps, and thank you for submitting, and yeah, take care. I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Okay, and finally the last piece I'm going to do for this video is this one here. So it's by Dana. Sorry, just going to get rid of that there. This piece, submitted by Dana. It's really nice. Obviously, it's really well rendered. Anything I do to it, whenever it's this well rendered, is going to look worse. Even if it was compositionally, it's gonna look worse because I'm not going to be able to render to this higher level when I'm just doing a quick paint over. But no, it's just really nice. Obviously, it's really good. I think the one thing you had an issue with was struggling with the colours and lighting here. I don't know why, but it feels off. Like it doesn't seem to be getting the strong backlight from the moon that I'm aiming for. That's for one simple reason, really, that the moon is the light source, is always going to be lighter depending on the angle of the camera and certain exposure, of course, but your light source was like 80, 85, 89% on the value scale. There's not a lot of room to work there unless you go up to 100, and then even then you're kind of blending in with the moon that you have in the background. So it's not even going to look like a rim light there, but depending on the material as well, with like subsurface scattering and translucency, you can get things to look a little bit more like a rim light. But my advice would be to pull back on the moon or make it less dominant, because the only thing I'm seeing within this image, apart from the obvious, the face, is the moon, really, because the contrast around the edges, darkest points here around the edges of the image, some things here, but that moon is just so dominant that I don't really see the face at all. In fact, I can barely see it in the thumbnail. So I think as an image, I would do something about, if you want to keep it monochromatic, that's fine, but just maybe get sort of like glowing eyes, or like whatever these things are here, the little bugs or little glowing things, then I would have that illuminate the face a lot more. As an image, then it will stand out a little bit better, and that I'm looking at the face of this character, which is really well rendered and it's worth looking at. Sorry. But the moon is just so dominant in this piece that it's difficult to do a rim light. What I would suggest would be is to either maybe remove the moon, or suggest the moon being there without actually seeing the moon, or simply just making it fade into the background a little bit, I think, so that its value isn't so high on the value scale. So just dim that moon a little bit. I know it sometimes might look like it's not as bright then, but it's all relative, isn't it? So if I select and inverse that then, and then increase the darkness in a lot of these areas, it'll look, especially if I increase the lower levels there and some of those mid levels. Now I can come in with something like an 85 or 90, what we had last time, what your moon used to be, obviously, and now it looks super bright in comparison, right? You can even push to 100 if you wanted to, and kind of fill that in there. I can, rendering material like hat's going to affect, the lighting's going to affect it slightly differently. Here is just going to glow, so like you have this translucency here, this furry kind of coat, cape thing is gonna get illuminated on the one side, but because hair is like translucent, then you get like you get a bit of color burn through it, don't you? You get a little bit of a you get the color coming through, and the light bounces within the fibers of the thing that you're illuminating, and It's very easy to go overboard with that though a little bit. Yeah, the fibers get illuminated in the thing that you're illuminating, if it's translucent, and you can lose a little bit of that when you're rendering it. But the edges, it'll glow. So the light comes in, illuminates something from the back, but because the light is piercing, and the I'm not explaining this very well, because the on a linear path here, say a blade of grass, and say the camera is here filming, and the light source is here and shooting the light hits the object, and because the camera's the other side, and because this is thin enough, the light can pierce through and get straight to the lens of the camera. But by doing so, it does this anyway, but we don't see it when we're looking through this direction or this direction, just because we're looking directly at the object. We can see right through it, much like when you put your torch from your camera, from your phone, when you put your torch from your phone on your fingers or in your ears, like anywhere that's kind of thin on the body, you can see it illuminate red. Subsurface scattering, I think it's called. Any kind of translucent material kind of has that, and it's just the light source piercing and bouncing around within the object before passing eventually through so that the camera can see it. But yeah, that's essentially what's happening to this fur down here, so you can kind of add that, and the believability of rendering materials, at least a little bit like how they act in the real world, would help with that rim light too. And I just think you needed a bit of brightness on that side. But maybe you didn't have it enough to play with it, because, I mean, you've already started to do it there, really, to be honest. You did it there. But you have a lot more room to play with once you've darkened everything else. So it's relativity, right? It's just you needed to darken your object and the moon behind it before you can see how effective the rim light can be. You know, it's like me wanting to, I really want a red chair to like stand out in this room, but everything else I bought in the room is red too. It's not really going to stand out. It's basically like that. So yeah, you really wanted this rim light, but you accidentally, you know, lightened up the whole background by putting the moon in there. But that's, you know, that's how images go. They just sort of develop naturally like that, don't they? You'd have a little bit down here, and you'd even have like in certain areas like here and here, you'd have that scattering glow that went with the dust fibers in the air have been caught by a really strong light. To kind of have that. I could do linear dodge. You kind of have that there like that. Something like that. Maybe it's too bright down here. I'm not sure. Something like that, very subtle. Might not even need to be down there. But I hope that helps though. So yeah, it's just relativity. Just make it darker so you can make your light brighter, really. Because we only have this scale to play with. There's only so much light and dark we can put in an image. Okay, thank you for watching. And if you want to submit your own work, there's a Discord channel down in the description. Feel free to add that, and in one of the channels there's a submission. Just post your work in there with a little brief description, and I'll probably get to it eventually. Thank you, bye bye.